They laughed when they saw the human rifle, laughed even harder when they saw the man holding it. But they weren't laughing after the first shot. The Galactic Tournament of Shame. The crystal spires of Station Nexus gleamed against the backdrop of 3 purple suns, casting rainbow patterns across the vast ceremonial hall where representatives from 47 star systems had gathered. The air hummed with excitement and the occasional burst of alien laughter that sounded like breaking glass mixed with distant thunder. Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force stood rigid at the human delegation table, her jaw clenched as she watched the massive holographic displays above the arena floor. The annual Precision Championships had become the galaxy's most watched sporting event, drawing billions of viewers across countless worlds. For the past century, the tournament had showcased the finest marksmen from every corner of known space, their advanced weapons systems and genetically enhanced abilities creating spectacles that defied imagination. Plasma bolts that curved around obstacles, gravitational bullets that bent space itself, energy beams that could track targets through multiple dimensions. The technology on display made Earth's weapons look like stone tools. Admiral Voska of the Krillian Empire, a towering figure with 6 arms and scales that shifted colors with his emotions, stepped forward to address the assembled crowd. His translator device rendered his clicks and hisses into perfect galactic standard. Honored competitors and esteemed guests, we gather once again to celebrate precision, skill, and the advancement of military technology across our great alliance. The crowd erupted in cheers, a cacophony of sounds that would have been painful to human ears if not for the acoustic dampeners built into the station. Sarah noticed how the other delegations leaned forward eagerly, their various forms of eyes gleaming with anticipation. The Zephyrians with their hawk-like features and natural telescopic vision, the crystalline hegemony representatives whose bodies could calculate trajectory with computer-like precision, the biomechanical collective, their weapon systems literally growing from their modified limbs. However, Admiral Voska continued, his scales shifting to an amused purple, before we begin this year's competition, we have prepared something special for your entertainment. Sarah's blood turned cold. She had heard rumors about this moment, whispered warnings from sympathetic alien contacts who had attended planning meetings. The main display screens flickered to life, showing grainy footage from Earth's military training facilities. The video quality was deliberately poor, making human soldiers look clumsy and incompetent as they fired their projectile weapons at paper targets. The footage showed a young recruit missing a stationary target at 50 meters, the bullet sailing harmlessly into a sand berm. Another clip displayed a soldier stumbling while carrying a heavy sniper rifle, nearly dropping the weapon. The camera lingered on missed shots, equipment malfunctions, and training accidents that had been carefully selected to make humanity appear as foolish as possible. "Behold," Admiral Voska announced with theatrical grandeur, "the military prowess of the species that calls itself humanity. A race so primitive that they still use chemical propellants to launch metal projectiles at their enemies. A species that relies on crude mechanical sights instead of advanced targeting systems." The alien audience burst into laughter that sounded like a storm tearing through a metal factory. Some species slapped what passed for their knees, while others released pheromones that filled the air with the scent of amusement. The crystalline delegates chimed like broken bells, their bodies resonating with mirth. Even the usually stoic void walkers seemed to ripple with what might have been the closest thing their species had to laughter. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks as the mockery continued. Lieutenant Torres, seated beside her, whispered urgently, "Commander, should we lodge a formal protest? This is clearly a violation of diplomatic protocol." Before Sarah could respond, the Admiral continued his presentation. "In the spirit of galactic unity and perhaps some additional entertainment, we have extended an invitation to the humans to participate in this year's championships. While we do not expect them to advance beyond the preliminary rounds, their presence will serve as an amusing reminder of how far our civilizations have progressed." More laughter rippled through the crowd, but Sarah noticed something interesting. Not every alien was laughing. The delegation from the Warrior Moon sat in stony silence, their scarred faces revealing nothing. The Ancient Sage Collective seemed more curious than amused, their multiple eyes studying the footage with analytical interest rather than derision. Most intriguingly, she spotted a lone figure in the observation deck, a being she recognized as Scout Prime Kethvar of the Shadow Fleet, known throughout the galaxy as one of the deadliest snipers in existence. He wasn't laughing either. The display screens shifted to show Earth's official response to the invitation. Sarah watched her own face appear on the massive screens as the recording played her carefully worded acceptance speech. She had tried to maintain dignity while acknowledging the vast technological gap between Earth and the galactic community. At the time, she thought she had struck the right tone. Now, watching it play before this hostile audience, every word seemed weak and defensive. "The humans have graciously accepted our invitation," Admiral Voska announced. "Their representative will arrive within the next cycle to demonstrate their unique approach to precision warfare." The crowd's amusement reached new heights at the word unique, which the translator rendered with multiple layers of sarcasm. Sarah gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. She had known this moment would come, had prepared for it, but experiencing the humiliation firsthand was far worse than she had imagined. Captain Rexthul of the Zephyrian war caste leaned over from the neighboring table, his razor-sharp beak clicking with amusement. "Commander Chen, we appreciate your species' courage in accepting this invitation. It will be refreshing to compete against opponents who provide no challenge whatsoever." His translator couldn't fully capture the condescending tone in his native language, but the intent was clear enough. Several other delegates turned to watch the exchange, eager to see how the human would respond to the provocation. Sarah took a deep breath, calling upon years of diplomatic training. "Captain Rexthul, we look forward to showing the galaxy what human determination can accomplish. You might be surprised by what our representative brings to this competition." The Zephyrian's feathers ruffled in what passed for laughter among his species. "Determination is admirable, Commander, but this is a contest of skill and technology. Your primitive weapons will be outclassed by every system in this tournament. Perhaps you should consider withdrawing now to save your species further embarrassment." Before Sarah could respond, a new voice cut through the conversation. "I find it curious how quickly some species dismiss potential threats." Everyone turned to see Scout Prime Kethvar approaching their section. The Shadow Fleet operative was humanoid but taller and thinner than any human, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His movements were fluid and silent, earning him the nickname Ghostwalker among those who had survived encounters with his kind. Captain Rexthul's feathers flattened against his head in a display of sudden caution. Few beings in the galaxy were foolish enough to provoke a member of the Shadow Fleet, especially one of Kethvar's reputation. "Scout Prime," Rexthul said carefully, "surely you do not suggest that these humans pose any real threat in a competition of precision?" Kethvar's head tilted in a gesture that might have been curiosity. "I have studied the combat records of many species. Those who survive despite technological disadvantages often possess other qualities worth noting: adaptability, creativity, unpredictability. These can be more dangerous than the most advanced weapons." The conversation was drawing attention from across the hall. Other delegations strained to listen as the legendary sniper continued speaking. "Tell me, Commander Chen," Kethvar addressed Sarah directly, "what manner of warrior has your species chosen to represent them?" Sarah hesitated. The truth was that Earth's military leadership had debated this decision for weeks. Their most advanced marksmen used weapons and techniques that would seem laughably primitive compared to galactic standards. Their special forces operators were skilled but lacked experience against alien technology. In the end, they had made an unconventional choice. "Our representative is someone who understands the true nature of precision," Sarah said carefully. "Not just accuracy with weapons, but the ability to read situations, adapt to changing conditions, and find solutions that others might overlook." Kethvar's expression remained unreadable, but something in his posture suggested interest. "Intriguing. And when will this warrior arrive?" "Soon," Sarah replied, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. The huntsman emerges. The docking bay of Station Nexus thrummed with activity as cargo haulers and passenger shuttles moved through the controlled chaos of galactic commerce. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the arrival terminal, checking her chronometer for the third time in 5 minutes. The human transport was already 20 minutes late, and every delay gave the alien delegations more time to spread their mockery throughout the station's social networks. A low rumble echoed through the bay as a battered Earth transport finally emerged from the docking tunnel. The ship looked ancient compared to the sleek vessels surrounding it, its hull scarred by countless journeys through space debris and atmospheric entries. Several alien dock workers paused their activities to stare at the primitive craft, their expressions ranging from amusement to pity. The airlock hissed open with a sound that seemed embarrassingly loud in the sophisticated environment of the station. Sarah straightened her uniform and prepared to greet Earth's representative, hoping that Jake Morrison would at least look the part of a competent soldier. What emerged from the transport was not what anyone expected. Jake Morrison was 45 years old and looked like he had spent every one of those years outdoors. His weathered face carried the deep tan of someone who had worked under open skies, and his gray-streaked hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. He wore a standard Earth military uniform, but it somehow looked different on him, lived in rather than pressed, practical rather than ceremonial. Most surprising of all, he carried only a single worn duffel bag and a long wrapped bundle that could only be his weapon. Sarah approached him with as much confidence as she could muster. "Mr. Morrison, welcome to Station Nexus. I'm Commander Chen." Jake shifted the bundle to his left hand and extended his right for a firm handshake. His grip was calloused and strong, the hands of someone who had built things and fixed things and used tools for their intended purposes rather than for show. "Pleasure to meet you, Commander. Though I have to say, this place is fancier than anything I've ever seen." His voice carried the easy drawl of someone from Earth's rural regions, completely at odds with the high-tech environment surrounding them. As they walked through the station's corridors toward the competitor quarters, Sarah couldn't help but notice the stares Jake attracted. Alien beings paused their conversations to watch the human pass, their various forms of expression clearly conveying disbelief. Here was Earth's answer to the greatest marksman in the galaxy, a middle-aged man who looked like he would be more comfortable around a campfire than a battlefield. "Sir," Sarah said quietly, "I should prepare you for what you're going to face here. The other competitors have weapons and capabilities that are centuries ahead of anything we possess. Their targeting systems can compensate for gravity, atmosphere, planetary rotation, even quantum fluctuations. Some of them have been genetically enhanced for improved vision and reflexes." Jake nodded thoughtfully as they passed a group of crystalline beings whose bodies were literally calculating ballistic trajectories, their internal structures shifting and flowing like living computers. "I imagine they would have advantages like that. Question is, do any of them know how to hunt?" Before Sarah could ask what he meant by that, they arrived at the competitor preparation area. The space was enormous, filled with weapon maintenance stations, holographic targeting ranges, and diagnostic equipment that hummed with energy. Dozens of alien marksmen worked with their weapon systems, fine-tuning plasma alignments and calibrating targeting computers that could probably navigate a starship on their own. Captain Rex Thule noticed their arrival first. The Zephyrian war leader approached with his characteristic predatory stride, his razor-sharp beak gleaming under the artificial lights. Behind him came a small crowd of other competitors, drawn by curiosity to see Earth's representative. "So this is humanity's chosen warrior," Rex Thule announced, his translator adding layers of disdain to every word. "I confess I expected someone more impressive." Jake set his duffel bag down and began unwrapping his weapon bundle with methodical care. "Well, Captain, I found that the most dangerous things in the woods don't always look dangerous. Sometimes the prettiest flower is the most poisonous, and sometimes the quietest predator is the deadliest."
The alien crowd pressed closer as Jake revealed his weapon. It was a modified Earth rifle, but not the sleek military hardware they might have expected. The weapon showed clear signs of personal modification. A custom stock worn smooth by years of handling, a scope that had been adjusted and readjusted countless times, and a barrel that gleamed with the kind of care that came from genuine respect for the tool. A chorus of clicking, chirping, and harmonic resonance filled the air as the aliens communicated their amusement to each other. To their eyes, Jake's rifle was laughably primitive. No targeting computer, no energy source, no advanced materials that could reshape themselves for optimal performance. "That weapon must be centuries old by galactic standards," observed a representative from the collective, its biomechanical limbs shifting to better examine the human rifle. "How does it even function without quantum targeting matrices?" Jake finished his inspection of the rifle and looked up with a slight smile. "Same way my grandfather's rifle worked, and his grandfather's before him. You point it at what you want to hit, you account for wind and distance and the movement of your target, and then you squeeze the trigger real gentle-like." The simplicity of his explanation seemed to amuse the aliens even more. Several of them began demonstrating their own weapons, eager to show the primitive human what real precision instruments looked like. Rex Thule activated a gravity rifle that could bend space around its projectiles, allowing shots to curve around obstacles and strike targets from impossible angles. A hegemony warrior displayed an energy weapon that could lock onto targets through solid matter, and fire beams that phased through obstacles to strike their intended marks. Most impressive was a Shadow Fleet operative who revealed a weapon that could fire projectiles through dimensional rifts, appearing instantly at their target location, regardless of distance or barriers. Jake watched each demonstration with polite interest, nodding appreciatively at the advanced technology. When the show concluded, he picked up his rifle and walked to the nearest practice range. "Mind if I take a few shots?" he asked. "It's been a long trip, and I like to make sure everything's still working properly." The range officer, a multi-armed being whose species specialized in precision engineering, gestured toward the target area with obvious condescension. "Of course, human. The targets are set at standard distances, 500 meters for preliminary assessment." Jake shouldered his rifle and looked through the scope, taking his time to examine the target. It was a simple circular design, nothing like the complex moving holograms the other competitors had been using. He adjusted his position slightly, seeming to feel for something that only he could sense. The first shot echoed through the range with a sharp crack that sounded primitive compared to the whispered hums and musical chimes of the alien weapons. The target showed a hit in the outer ring, respectable for a human, but far from impressive by galactic standards. Several aliens began to drift away, having seen enough to confirm their expectations. Jake fired again, this time hitting closer to the center. Still nothing remarkable. The third shot was better still, and by the fourth, he was consistently hitting the center ring. "Acceptable accuracy for primitive technology," Rexthol commented dismissively. "Though I noticed significant inconsistency in your initial attempts." Jake lowered the rifle and turned to face the Zephyrian warrior. "Oh, that wasn't inconsistency, Captain. I was reading the range." "Reading the range?" "Sure. First shot told me about the air circulation in here. There's a slight cross breeze from the ventilation system that kicks in every 43 seconds. Second shot measured the gravity differential. The station's artificial gravity is about 3% stronger than Earth standard. Third shot checked for any magnetic interference from all this electronic equipment. Fourth shot confirmed that my rifle is properly zeroed for these conditions." The explanation drew puzzled looks from the alien observers. Their weapons automatically compensated for such factors, making manual adjustments unnecessary. The idea that someone would deliberately fire inaccurate shots to gather information seemed wasteful and inefficient. "Now," Jake continued, "shall we try something a bit more challenging?" He gestured toward the advanced target systems the other competitors had been using. The range officer, intrigued despite himself, activated a complex scenario involving multiple moving targets at varying distances and elevations.
Jake settled into a shooting position that looked deceptively casual, his breathing slow and steady. Through the scope, he tracked the targets as they moved through their programmed patterns. But instead of firing immediately, he waited, watching, learning the rhythm of their movement. The first target was a standard humanoid silhouette moving laterally at 800 meters. Jake led it slightly, accounting for its speed and the time his projectile would take to reach the target zone. The shot struck center mass, dropping the hologram instantly. A second target appeared at a different elevation, weaving unpredictably through a series of obstacles. Jake waited until it passed behind a barrier, then fired at empty space. When the target emerged from cover, it ran directly into his bullet. One by one, he eliminated targets that grew progressively more difficult. Moving platforms, targets that changed direction randomly, even holograms that could partially phase in and out of visibility. Each shot required him to calculate not just distance and movement, but to predict patterns that the target systems themselves didn't know they were following. The alien observers had stopped talking. Even Rexthol's aggressive posture had shifted to something approaching attention. These weren't lucky shots or advanced technology making up for human limitations. This was pure skill, refined by years of practice and an understanding of movement and timing that couldn't be programmed into a computer. The final target was a challenge that had stumped several of the advanced competitors earlier in the day. A small drone moving erratically at maximum range, protected by energy shields that could deflect most weapons. The key was finding the precise moment when the shields cycled through their rotation, creating a brief window of vulnerability. Jake watched the drone's pattern for nearly 2 minutes, his rifle steady despite the extended wait. The alien spectators grew restless, assuming he was struggling to find a shot. Finally, he made a minute adjustment to his aim and fired. The projectile struck the drone at the exact instant its shields rotated away from the impact point. The target exploded in a shower of sparks that drew gasps of surprise from the watching aliens. Scout Prime Kethvar, who had been observing silently from the back of the crowd, stepped forward with something that might have been approval in his dark features. "Impressive, the Shadow Fleet operative said quietly. You did not rely on technology to find the shield weakness. You observed, calculated, and waited for the optimal moment. Jake nodded respectfully. In the woods, rushing a shot usually means going home empty-handed. Sometimes the best shot is the one you don't take until you're absolutely certain. Rexithul's feathers had flattened against his head in a display of uncertainty. This demonstration proves nothing. These are controlled conditions, predictable scenarios. Real combat is chaos. That's true, Jake agreed, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. But I've found that chaos usually follows certain patterns once you learn to recognize them. A wounded bear is dangerous, but it's dangerous in predictable ways. A storm might be random, but it still obeys the laws of physics. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah found herself walking beside Jake toward the competitor quarters. Her initial doubts about Earth's choice of representative were beginning to fade, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation. Mr. Morrison, she said quietly, I think tomorrow's preliminary rounds are going to be very interesting. Jake smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features. Commander, I spent 30 years learning to hunt things that could kill me if I made a mistake. These alien weapons are impressive, but I've yet to see one that can think like a hunter. As they reached his assigned quarters, Jake paused at the door. Through the transparent walls, they could see other competitors working late into the night, running diagnostics on their weapons and practicing with holographic targets. They're all very focused on their equipment, Jake observed. That's good craftsmanship, but they're missing something important. What's that? The most important part of any hunt isn't the weapon you carry. It's the knowledge you carry up here. He tapped his temple. And the patience you carry in here. He placed his hand over his heart. Tomorrow, they're going to learn that humans might not have the best technology, but we've had to learn to be the best hunters. The preliminary rounds would begin in 8 hours, and across the station, alien competitors prepared with confidence backed by centuries of technological advancement. But in a modest quarters on Deck 7, a human hunter cleaned his rifle with practiced movements and prepared to show the galaxy what millions of years of evolution as persistence predators had taught his species about the art of war, the silent thunder. The artificial dawn of Station Nexus cast long shadows across the observation decks as beings from across the galaxy gathered to witness the final round of the Precision Championships. What had begun as entertainment at humanity's expense had evolved into something far more serious. Jake Morrison's performance in the preliminary rounds had silenced the laughter and drawn the attention of military observers from every major power in the Galactic Alliance. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the competitor's preparation area, watching Jake make his final equipment checks with the same methodical care he had shown throughout the tournament. His modified rifle lay disassembled on the maintenance bench, each component cleaned and inspected despite having performed flawlessly for 3 days of competition. The preliminary rounds had been a revelation. While alien competitors relied on their advanced targeting systems and enhanced physiology, Jake had demonstrated something that couldn't be manufactured or programmed, an almost supernatural ability to read the environment around him and adapt to changing conditions. In the urban combat simulation, he had used sound and shadow to track targets that were invisible to conventional sensors. During the long-range precision test, he had compensated for atmospheric disturbances that the range computers hadn't even detected. Most remarkably, in the rapid-fire accuracy challenge, he had outperformed competitors whose weapons could literally slow down time perception to improve their aim. Now only 2 marksmen remained for the final challenge, and the contrast between them couldn't have been more striking. Captain Vextar of the Zephyrian Warcast stood at the opposite end of the preparation area, his 7-foot frame encased in powered armor that hummed with energy. His weapon was a masterpiece of galactic engineering, a plasma rifle integrated directly into his suit's targeting system, capable of firing projectiles that could phase through solid matter and strike targets on the molecular level. Genetic modifications had given him vision that could track objects moving at near light speed, and combat implants provided reflexes measured in microseconds. Jake, by comparison, looked like he was preparing for a weekend hunting trip. He wore standard Earth military fatigues with no enhancements beyond body armor that was centuries behind galactic standards. His rifle, though lovingly maintained, remained fundamentally the same chemical propellant weapon that human soldiers had carried for generations. Admiral Voska approached the human preparation area, his scales shifting through colors that indicated a complex mixture of curiosity and concern. The tournament that had begun as a display of alien superiority had become something else entirely, a demonstration that raw technology might not be the only path to military excellence. "Human Morrison," the Admiral said through his translator, "I confess that your performance has been unexpected. Your species has shown capabilities that our intelligence assessments did not predict. Jake looked up from his rifle assembly, nodding politely. Well, Admiral, I imagine your intelligence folks haven't had much reason to study human hunters. We're not exactly common out here among the stars. Indeed. Tell me, what makes you believe you can compete against Captain Vextar? His enhancements and equipment represent the pinnacle of Zephyrian military technology. Jake finished reassembling his rifle and shouldered it, checking the balance with practiced ease. Admiral, I've been thinking about that question for 3 days now. Captain Vextar is certainly impressive, faster than me, stronger than me, equipped with technology I can barely understand. But there's one thing I learned hunting dangerous game back on Earth. And what is that? The most dangerous predators aren't necessarily the fastest or the strongest. They're the ones that understand their environment better than their prey does. Before the Admiral could respond, the tournament announcer's voice echoed through the station. The final round would take place on Kethvar Prime, a desolate moon with extreme gravitational anomalies and an atmosphere that played havoc with most sensor systems. The conditions had been chosen specifically to challenge every form of technology and enhancement the competitors possessed. The transport to Kethvar Prime was silent except for the hum of engines and the occasional adjustment of equipment. Jake sat quietly, eyes closed, while Vextar conducted final systems checks that filled the cabin with soft electronic chimes and status lights. Sarah found herself studying both competitors with growing fascination. Vextar embodied everything the Galactic military establishment valued: enhanced capabilities, advanced technology, seamless integration between warrior and weapon. He was the product of millennia of technological advancement and selective breeding. Jake represented something else entirely. He carried no enhancements, relied on no computer assistance, and used weapons that most galactic citizens would recognize only from historical displays. Yet somehow, he had proven himself capable of matching and sometimes exceeding the performance of beings whose natural abilities far surpassed his own. Kethvar Prime was a nightmare landscape of twisted metal spires and gravitational distortions that made the horizon curve upward in impossible directions. The moon's irregular rotation created winds that could change direction without warning, and its metal-rich composition interfered with electronic systems in unpredictable ways. The final challenge was elegant in its simplicity. Each competitor would hunt the other across 5 kilometers of treacherous terrain. The first to score a confirmed hit would be declared champion. No time limits, no artificial restrictions. Just 2 marksmen testing their skills against each other in conditions that would challenge every aspect of their training and equipment. Vextar deployed from the transport with mechanical precision, his armor adapting to the moon's gravity and atmospheric conditions before his feet touched the ground. Sensor arrays extended from his helmet like metallic antennae, gathering data about wind patterns, terrain composition, and gravitational fluctuations. His weapon systems ran continuous diagnostics, adjusting for the electromagnetic interference that saturated the environment. Jake stepped onto the moon's surface and immediately knelt to pick up a handful of the metallic dust that covered everything. He let it fall through his fingers, watching how the irregular gravity affected its movement. Then he wet his finger and held it up, feeling for air currents that his enhanced opponent's sensors might miss. The starting signal came as a low tone that carried across the twisted landscape. Both competitors immediately disappeared into the maze of metal spires and gravity wells that would serve as their hunting ground. Vextar moved with calculated efficiency, his route planned by tactical algorithms that processed thousands of variables per second. His armor's adaptive camouflage shifted constantly, matching the colors and textures of his surroundings. Sensor sweeps painted detailed pictures of the terrain ahead, marking potential hiding spots and optimal firing positions. Jake moved differently. Where Vextar relied on technology to navigate the alien landscape, the human fell back on instincts developed through decades of tracking dangerous prey through Earth's wilderness. He read the environment like a book written in a language older than civilization. The way shadows fell, the patterns of erosion on the metal spires, the subtle changes in air pressure that indicated gravitational anomalies ahead. For the first hour, neither competitor caught sight of the other. They moved through the maze like ghosts, each seeking the perfect position for a shot that would end the contest. Vextar's technological advantages allowed him to move faster and gather more information, but Jake's understanding of hunting behavior gave him insights that no computer could provide. Jake found the first sign of his opponent 2 hours into the hunt, a scuff mark on a metal beam where Vextar's armor had scraped against the surface. The mark was small, barely visible, but it told Jake everything he needed to know about his opponent's movement pattern. Vextar was staying high, using the elevated positions that his armor's enhanced mobility made possible. That knowledge allowed Jake to predict his opponent's route and begin positioning himself accordingly. Instead of chasing Vextar through the maze, he began moving toward a position where the Zephyrian would eventually have to pass. Vextar, meanwhile, was growing frustrated with his inability to locate the human. His sensors could detect movement at considerable distances, but Jake seemed to have vanished entirely. The human moved when the wind was strongest, masked his thermal signature and gravitational cold spots, and somehow avoided every sensor sweep that should have revealed his position. The realization came to Vexitar gradually: he was being hunted. The primitive human with his ancient weapon had somehow turned the contest around, becoming the predator while the enhanced Zephyrian warrior became the prey. The psychological impact of this reversal affected Vextar's normally perfect tactical calculations, introducing an element of uncertainty that his systems couldn't compensate for. Jake found his position 3 hours into the hunt. A narrow canyon between two towering spires offered excellent concealment and a clear view of the natural path that Vextar would have to take to maintain his high ground advantage. The range would be challenging, nearly 2 kilometers through swirling gravitational fields, but well within his capabilities. He settled into a shooting position that would have been familiar to snipers throughout human history, prone behind a natural rest, rifle steady, breathing controlled. But instead of immediately looking for his target, Jake spent long minutes studying the environment. Wind patterns in the canyon, the way gravity distortions bent light through the atmosphere, the rhythm of the planet's irregular rotation that affected the apparent movement of distant objects. When Vextar finally appeared in Jake's scope, the Zephyrian was moving with the confidence of someone who believed himself unobserved. His armor had adapted to perfectly match the surrounding terrain, making him nearly invisible to conventional sensors. But Jake wasn't relying on technology to spot his target. He had been watching for the one thing that no camouflage could hide: the disturbance that any moving object created in its environment. A subtle shift in wind patterns where Vextar's body displaced air, the faint gravitational ripple caused by mass moving through the moon's distorted space-time, signs that were invisible to electronic sensors but clear to eyes trained to read the natural world. Jake took his time lining up the shot. Vextar was moving on a predictable path, his route determined by tactical algorithms that favored efficiency over unpredictability. The human calculated lead time, gravity drop, and wind drift using methods that were ancient when humanity first reached for the stars. The shot, when it came, was perfect. The projectile crossed 2 kilometers of twisted space in just over 2 seconds, following a curved path that compensated for 3 separate gravitational anomalies. It struck Vexitar's armor with a metallic ring that echoed across the canyon, activating the suit's hit detection systems and ending the contest. In the stunned silence that followed, Jake lowered his rifle and activated his communicator. "This is Morrison. I have a confirmed hit on the target." The response from the orbiting observation ship was delayed, as if the alien officials couldn't quite believe what their sensors were telling them. Finally, Admiral Voskov's voice crackled through the static. "Confirmed. Human Morrison is declared champion of this year's Precision Championships." The journey back to Station Nexus passed in a blur of congratulations and interview requests from beings who had spent the previous week mocking humanity's primitive military capabilities. Jake handled the attention with the same calm patience he had shown throughout the competition, deflecting praise and emphasizing that he represented only himself, not the entirety of human military capability. But Sarah knew that wasn't entirely true. Word of Jake's victory was already spreading through diplomatic channels, carried by the same alien observers who had come to witness humanity's humiliation. The galaxy was learning that Earth might not have the most advanced technology, but they possessed something equally valuable: warriors who could adapt, improvise, and overcome challenges that would stump more advanced civilizations. In the quiet of the transport bay, as aliens who had dismissed humanity just days before now spoke in hushed, respectful tones about the primitive species that had produced such a formidable warrior, Sarah found herself standing beside Jake as he prepared to board the Earth transport. "Mr. Morrison," she said quietly, "I think you've accomplished something far more important than winning a shooting contest." Jake shouldered his rifle bag and looked back at the alien delegates who were still processing what they had witnessed. "Well, Commander, I hope I've at least given them something to think about. Sometimes the best way to avoid a fight is to make sure your potential enemies know you're ready for one." As the Earth transport undocked from Station Nexus and began its journey home, Jake Morrison settled into his seat and closed his eyes. Behind them, representatives from dozens of alien civilizations were composing reports that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity. The species that had been dismissed as primitives was suddenly being reassessed as a potential military threat. But Jake wasn't thinking about galactic politics or diplomatic implications. He was thinking about the mountains of Earth. where he had learned to hunt, and the simple truth that had carried him through 3 days of competition against the galaxy's finest marksman. The most advanced weapon in the universe was still a thinking mind guided by patient skill and tempered by hard-won experience. Technology could enhance capability, but it couldn't replace the fundamental understanding of hunting and being hunted that humanity had earned through millions of years of evolution. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's primitive weapons and simple tactics. They weren't laughing anymore. In the depths of space, as the transport carried Earth's champion home, diplomatic messages flashed between star systems as alien governments quietly began reassessing their expansion plans. The species they had dismissed as irrelevant had proven they could produce warriors capable of defeating the galaxy's finest. The age of underestimating humanity was over.